What happens when you try to humiliate a man who plays chess while everyone else is playing checkers? When Julian Thorne, the tech billionaire behind Titan Innovations, was cheated on by his wife Amelia, he didn't scream or break things. He simply signed the divorce papers and moved on. But 2 years later, Amelia decides the world needs to see her upgrade the very man she left Julian for. She orchestrates a confrontation at New York's most prestigious charity gala, planning to parade her new life in his face. She thought she was lighting a match to burn his pride. She didn't realize she was standing in a room soaked in gasoline, and Julian Thorne was holding the detonator. This isn't just a story of revenge, it's a masterclass in demolition. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. It wasn't delivered by a standard courier, but by a specialized service that handled sensitive documents for Manhattan's elite, encased in a thick, cream-colored envelope made of pressed cotton. Julian Thorne's executive assistant, a ruthlessly efficient woman named Clara, placed it on his expansive obsidian desk with a pair of silver tongs as if it might be contaminated. "This came for you, Mr. Thorne, personally addressed," she said, her tone clipped. Julian didn't look up from the schematics of a new quantum computing processor he was reviewing. At 42, he possessed a stillness that many mistook for detachment. It was in reality the hyper-focused calm of a predator. His dark hair had the barest whisper of silver at the temples, and his eyes, a deep charcoal gray, missed nothing. He built his empire, Titan Innovations, from a garage startup into a global behemoth by anticipating every variable. It was a skill he applied to all aspects of his life. From whom Clara, Amelia Vance. The name hung in the sterile air of his 90th floor office. It wasn't her birth name, nor was it his. It was the name she had adopted after their divorce, a theatrical, old-money-sounding name she felt suited her new station. Vance. It sounded like a sigh of disappointment. Julian finally lifted his gaze. "Let me see it." The invitation was for the Children's Legacy Foundation Heritage Gala, the undisputed pinnacle of New York's philanthropic calendar. It was an event Julian was already a primary sponsor of. His personal invitation, the one that truly mattered, was already on the mantelpiece of his penthouse. This one was different. This was a message. Inside, nestled next to the formal invitation, was a handwritten note on matching stationery. The handwriting was Amelia's large looping letters that always seemed to take up more space than necessary. "Dearest Julian, I know it's been some time, but I truly hope you can make it to the Heritage Gala this year. Marcus and I have just joined the Junior Patrons Board, and we're so thrilled to be giving back. It would mean the world to me to see you there and properly catch up. We have so much wonderful news to share. Let's let bygones be bygones for old time's sake. Warmly, Amelia." Every word was a carefully polished stone thrown in his direction. Marcus. Marcus Cole, the man who had once been Julian's promising young mentee in Titan's R&D department. The man Julian had welcomed into his home. The man who had been sleeping with his wife for nearly a year before he found out. The wonderful news Julian knew from the society pages Amelia so desperately courted was that Marcus had launched his own tech firm, Innovatech, which had by some miracle secured a massive round of funding and was being lauded as the next big thing. Amelia was positioning herself as the glamorous muse behind the genius. Julian leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning softly. He remembered the day it all fell apart. Not with a dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet click of a file opening. He'd been beta testing a new home security protocol that synced audio from all devices. He wasn't looking for anything, just running a diagnostic. But the system flagged a conversation from the guest house, Amelia's art studio. Her voice in Marcus's. They weren't talking about art. They were laughing about him. About how he was too busy, too sterile, too focused on changing the world to pay attention to the woman in his bed. They mocked his quiet intensity, his methodical nature, the very traits that had built the world they so comfortably inhabited. He didn't confront them. The next morning his lawyer served Amelia with divorce papers. The settlement was ironclad and brutally efficient. She got the Hamptons beach house, a generous alimony for 5 years, and a portfolio of investments. What she didn't get was a single share of Titan Innovations. She didn't get his name. She didn't get the satisfaction of a fight. He had simply excised her. Now, 2 years later, she was trying to crawl back into his orbit. Not as a contrite ex-wife, but as a victor. This invitation wasn't an olive branch. It was a gauntlet. She wanted to stand in the center of his world on a stage he had essentially paid for and show everyone that she had won. That her new man Marcus was his equal or even his superior. A slow smile touched Julian's lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Clara," he said, his voice a low hum. "Please RSVP to Miss Vance. Let her know that Dr. Eris Thorne and I would be delighted to attend." Clara's eyebrow arched slightly. Dr. Eris Thorne, Julian's wife of 6 months, a brilliant pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon he had met at a medical technology conference. She was everything Amelia was not: genuine, intellectually curious, and utterly unimpressed by his wealth. She was impressed by his mind, his dedication, and the quiet kindness he showed his 10-year-old daughter, Lily. "And Clara," Julian added, picking up the schematic again, "get me Donovan on the line, and then reach out to our legal team. Tell them I want a full deep dive workup on a company called Innovatech. Financials, investor profiles, intellectual property filings. Everything. I want to know who funded them, how they operate, and what they had for breakfast this morning." The trap had not been set by Amelia. She had merely walked towards it. Julian Thorne was going to spring it. The 2 weeks leading up to the Heritage Gala were for Julian a period of quiet, intense activity. On the surface, his life was unchanged. He oversaw the final testing phase of Titan's new satellite network, had dinner with Eris and Lily every night, and helped his daughter with her impossibly complex Lego architecture sets. But beneath that placid surface, the gears were turning. His first call was to Donovan Gray, his head of security and corporate intelligence. Donovan was a former MI6 field agent who had retired to the far more lucrative world of private security. He was a ghost, a man who could procure information as easily as most people procured groceries. "Innovatech," Julian said, pacing his soundproofed home office, a glass of Japanese whiskey swirling in his hand. "Marcus Cole. I want the unvarnished truth, Donovan, not the press releases." "Already on it, Julian." Donovan's voice crackled through the secure line. "The public story is that he wowed a consortium of venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. The early whispers are a little different. The funding came through fast. Too fast. From a shell corporation based in the Cayman Islands. Smells like one big investor trying to stay hidden." "Find him," Julian ordered. "I want a name." Meanwhile, his legal team, a pack of sharks from the prestigious firm of Cromwell and Swain, began dissecting Innovatech's patents. The lead lawyer, a man named Sterling, called Julian 2 days later, his voice tight with professional outrage. "It's brazen, Julian," Sterling said. "Their core product, a predictive analytics engine for supply chain management. The base code is a direct lift from your Helios project. It's been cosmetically altered, layered with some new UI, but the foundational architecture is yours. Cole must have taken it with him when he left." Julian felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Helios was a project he had personally spearheaded. He had brought Marcus into the inner circle, shared his vision, trusted him. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional. It was theft. "Can you prove it?" Julian asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Give us a week," Sterling replied. "We'll find a digital fingerprint he was too arrogant to scrub." His parallel track was with the organizers of the Heritage Gala. He had a quiet lunch with the Foundation's chairwoman, a formidable society matriarch named Beatrice Vanderbilt. Over sea bass and iced tea at a discreet corner table at La Grenouille, Julian laid out his request. "Beatrice, I'm increasing my donation this year," he began. "Significantly, I want to announce a new initiative under the Foundation's umbrella." Beatrice's eyes lit up. "Julian, that's marvelous. What did you have in mind?" "I'm establishing the Thorne Grant for Ethical Innovation. It will be an annual endowment to fund startups that demonstrate unimpeachable business practices and transparency. But for its inaugural year, I want to do something special. I want the grant to fund a complete independent and very public audit of a promising new company to certify them as a gold standard of ethical practice, a new benchmark for the industry. Beatrice was ecstatic. It was a brilliant PR move for the foundation. What a novel idea. It will generate so much positive press. Do you have a company in mind for the inaugural honor? Julian took a slow sip of water. I do. A young dynamic firm called Innovatech. He let the name hang in the air. Beatrice, who knew the story of his divorce, understood immediately. A slow, calculating smile spread across her face. She saw the drama, the delicious high society spectacle of it all. Julian saw the checkmate. He would not accuse Marcus of theft. He would not scream or cause a scene. He would offer Marcus the greatest honor of his young career on the biggest stage in front of everyone who mattered. He would offer him a golden chalice, and Marcus would have no choice but to drink from it, knowing full well it was filled with poison. To refuse the honor of a Thorne-funded audit would be an admission of guilt. To accept it would be to light the fuse on his own destruction. That evening, Eris found him staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse. The lights of Manhattan spread before him like a carpet of scattered diamonds. She came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head on his back. "You've been quiet these last few days," she said softly. "This gala, it's about Amelia, isn't it?" Julian turned in her embrace, his hands finding hers. "It is. But not in the way you might think. This isn't about anger, Eris. I'm not the man I was 2 years ago. This is about closing a door and ensuring the rot from that part of my life doesn't touch what I have now. With you. With Lily." Eris looked up at him, her intelligent eyes searching his. "You're going to do something, aren't you? Something calculated." "I'm going to give them exactly what they want," Julian said, a glint of steel in his eyes. "A spotlight. They just don't realize how hot it's going to be." She nodded, trusting him completely. She knew the man. He was not vengeful, but fiercely protective. He wasn't lashing out. He was performing a surgery, cutting out a cancer with cold, precise skill. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed. The great hall, normally a cavern of echoing stone and quiet reverence, was now a glittering jewel box of human ambition. Crystal chandeliers brought in for the occasion cast a warm golden glow over the throngs of people dressed in their finest. The air hummed with the sound of champagne flutes clinking discreet laughter, and the murmur of billion-dollar deals being discussed under the guise of philanthropy. This was the Heritage Gala. Julian and Eris arrived with the understated elegance that was their signature. He wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, the kind of simple, perfect garment that cost more than most cars. Eris was breathtaking in a deep sapphire gown by Bottega Veneta that shimmered with every movement. She wore a single piece of jewelry, a delicate diamond necklace Julian had designed for her, its pattern mirroring the constellation that was in the sky the night they met. They didn't make an entrance. They simply appeared, and the gravity of the room subtly shifted toward them. They were greeted by Beatrice Vanderbilt, who gave Julian a look that was equal parts conspiratorial and thrilled. "Julian, Eris, you both look divine. We are so looking forward to your announcement later." They spent the first hour mingling. Julian was a master of these events. He moved through the crowd with an easy grace, speaking with senators, tech rivals, and artists with the same focused attention. He was introducing Eris to his world, but it was clear to everyone that she was not an accessory. She was his partner, engaging a renowned physicist in a debate about string theory one moment and charming a notoriously gruff hedge fund manager the next. And then he saw them. Amelia and Marcus made their entrance as if a spotlight was following them. Amelia was poured into a garish, bright red gown covered in sequins that caught the light and fractured it in every direction. It was a dress that screamed, "Look at me!" Her blonde hair was coiffed into an elaborate updo, and heavy diamond earrings, clearly new, dangled from her ears. Beside her, Marcus Cole looked like a boy playing dress-up in his father's clothes. His tuxedo was a size too big in the shoulders, and he wore a smug, self-satisfied grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was trying to project power and confidence, but it came across as nervous arrogance. He kept touching Amelia, his hand on her back, her arm a constant performative display of possession. They began to work the room, but their path was deliberate, a slow, winding trajectory that was designed to end at one place in front of Julian Thorne. Julian watched them, his expression unreadable. He felt nothing, no anger, no jealousy, just the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. Eris squeezed his hand gently. "Don't let them ruin our night," she whispered. "They won't," Julian replied, his voice calm. "They are merely the evening's entertainment." Finally, the moment arrived. Amelia, with Marcus in tow, glided toward them, her face arranged in a mask of pleasant surprise. "Julian, I was so hoping we'd run into you," she gushed, her voice a little too loud. "You remember Marcus, of course." Marcus extended a hand, the oversized cuff of his shirt bunching at his wrist. "Thorne, good to see you." The use of his last name was a deliberate power play, an attempt to put them on equal footing. Julian ignored the outstretched hand and turned his full attention to Amelia. "Amelia, you're looking vibrant." He then turned to Marcus, his eyes doing a slow, deliberate scan from the ill-fitting suit to the nervous sweat on his brow. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Cole." The dismissal was as sharp as a slap. Marcus's hand dropped awkwardly to his side. Amelia's smile tightened. "And this must be your new wife," she said, her eyes sweeping over Eris with a critical gaze, undoubtedly cataloging the designer, the jewelry, the cost. "Dr. Thorne, is it? I read that you're a surgeon. How noble." The word was meant to be a condescending pat on the head. Eris met her gaze without flinching. "It has its moments. Saving children's lives tends to be more fulfilling than, say, chairing a committee on floral arrangements for a luncheon. But I'm sure that's rewarding in its own way." The retort was delivered with a pleasant smile, but it was a scalpel sharp and precise. A faint blush crept up Amelia's neck. She had expected a mousy academic, not a woman who could hold her own. "Well," Amelia chirped, trying to regain control, "Marcus has been doing incredible things. Simply incredible. Innovatic is the talk of the town. He's a true visionary. Aren't you, darling?" She beamed at Marcus, who puffed out his chest. "We've had a great year," Marcus said, directing his words at Julian. "Disrupting the old guard, proving that there's a new way to do things, faster, more agile." Every word was a veiled insult aimed at Julian's established old guard company. Julian listened patiently, his head tilted slightly, an expression of mild interest on his face. He let them talk, let them lay out their entire narrative of triumph and success. He wanted them to feel confident, to believe they were controlling the encounter. "That's fascinating, Cole," Julian said when Marcus finally ran out of steam. His tone was neutral, but there was a dangerous current beneath it. "Agility is important, but so is foundation. It's easy to build a house of cards quickly. It's much harder to build something that lasts." He then smiled, a genuine warm smile that was utterly disarming. "But please excuse us. Beatrice is signaling for us. I believe the evening's presentations are about to begin." He placed a hand on Eris's back and guided her away, leaving Amelia and Marcus standing in their wake. Amelia looked triumphant, convinced she had landed her blows. She believed she had shown Julian her new superior life and left him wanting. Marcus, however, looked uneasy. He had seen the look in Julian's eyes. It wasn't the look of a defeated man. It was the look of a grandmaster who saw the board 10 moves ahead and had just watched his opponent make a fatal, predictable error. The entertainment was over. The main event was about to begin. As Julian and Eris took their seats at the main table next to Beatrice Vanderbilt, and a smattering of the city's most influential figures, A palpable sense of anticipation filled the room. The dinner portion of the evening concluded and the lights dimmed slightly. The master of ceremonies, a well-known news anchor, took the stage to begin the presentation and fundraising portion of the night. From his vantage point, Julian had a clear view of Amelia and Marcus. They were seated at a prominent table near the front, a table Amelia had no doubt fought hard for. She was preening, whispering to the people on her left and right, occasionally casting what she thought were subtle glances back at Julian's table. She was basking in what she perceived as her victory. Donovan Gray, dressed impeccably as a member of the event staff, materialized behind Julian's chair. He leaned down, pretending to adjust a water glass. "We have it," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the MC's opening remarks. "The money trail for Innovatech leads back to one man, Alistair Finch." Julian's blood ran cold. Alistair Finch was his most bitter rival, a ruthless vulture capitalist who had been trying to undermine Titan Innovations for years. It all clicked into place, too. Finch hadn't invested in Marcus because he believed in him. He had invested in Marcus to get his hands on stolen Titan IP. Marcus wasn't a visionary. He was a Trojan horse. "And the legal team," Julian murmured back, his eyes fixed on the stage. "They found it," Donovan confirmed. "A fragment of redundant code buried deep in Innovatech's system. It's a unique sequence, an encryption signature Julian himself designed for the Helios project. It's his DNA on the murder weapon. Sterling says it's irrefutable." "Thank you, Donovan," Julian said, giving a slight nod. The final piece was in place. On stage, the MC was going through the usual thank yous. He acknowledged the various sponsors, the board members, and finally the evening's primary benefactor. "And now we'd like to invite to the stage a man whose generosity and vision have been the bedrock of this foundation for over a decade. He is a titan of industry, a true innovator, and one of this city's greatest philanthropists. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Julian Thorne." A polite, then thunderous round of applause filled the hall. Julian rose, gave Eris's hand a reassuring squeeze, and walked to the stage. He moved with an unhurried, commanding presence that drew every eye in the room. He adjusted the microphone, his calm gaze sweeping across the sea of expectant faces. He saw Amelia. She was watching him with a smug, condescending pity, as if expecting him to give a boring speech about corporate responsibility. "Thank you," Julian began, his voice resonating with quiet power. "It's an honor to be here tonight supporting the incredible work of the Children's Legacy Foundation. We often talk about building a better future for our children. We think of schools of medicine of opportunity, and all of that is vital." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But tonight I want to talk about the foundation upon which all of that is built. Integrity, honesty, ethical conduct. In my industry, in the world of technology, we move at the speed of light. We celebrate disruption, agility, and breaking the old rules. But sometimes in our rush to build the new, we forget the timeless principles that give our work meaning." He saw Marcus shift uncomfortably in his seat. Amelia's smile had faded slightly, replaced by a look of confusion. "That is why tonight I am proud to announce the formation of a new endowment, under the Foundation's care, the Thorne Grant for Ethical Innovation." A ripple of intrigued murmurs went through the audience. "This grant will not be a simple cash prize," Julian continued, his voice steady and deliberate. "It will be something more valuable. Each year we will select one new promising company that is making waves in its field, and we will fund a comprehensive top-to-bottom independent audit of their operations, their financials, and their intellectual property. The goal is to certify them with a Thorne Gold standard of ethical excellence, a seal of approval that will tell the world, their investors, and their customers that they built their success the right way. It is an honor we hope will become the most coveted in the tech industry." The applause was genuine, now enthusiastic. It was a brilliant, innovative idea. Beatrice was beaming. Julian held up a hand. "And for the inaugural year, we wanted to choose a company that embodies the spirit of youthful ambition and rapid innovation. A company that has shot onto the scene and captured the imagination of the market. It is my great pleasure to announce that the first ever recipient of this certifying honor, this gold standard audit, is Innovatech. He said the name and turned his gaze directly, unerringly, onto Marcus Cole. The spotlight operator, following prearranged instructions, swung the brilliant white beam from Julian and onto Marcus's table. The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, the only sounds in the great hall were the faint hum of the air conditioning and the frantic, silent thumping of Amelia Vance's heart. The spotlight was a physical weight, pinning her and Marcus to their chairs. Hundreds of faces, a gallery of New York's most powerful and influential, were turned toward them. Their expressions ranged from confusion to dawning comprehension to predatory curiosity. Marcus was frozen, his face a ghastly shade of white. The smug grin was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed horror. His eyes were wide, darting from the blinding light to Julian on the stage, a cornered animal realizing the trap had just sprung. Amelia was the first to recover, though only just. Panic was a metallic taste in her mouth. This wasn't right. This wasn't how the evening was supposed to go. This was supposed to be her triumph. Julian was supposed to be the one squirming, the one left in the shadows. Instead, he stood on stage, a benevolent king bestowing a cursed crown upon them. On stage, Julian's expression was one of magnanimous encouragement. He was smiling. Marcus Cole, the brilliant founder of Innovatech, is here with us tonight, Julian announced, his voice booming through the speakers. Marcus, please stand up and be recognized. The MC, now understanding his role in this unfolding drama, began to applaud enthusiastically. Following his lead, the audience, sensing a spectacle, joined in. The sound was deafening. It was an ovation, but it felt like a judgment. Prodded by Amelia's frantic under-the-table nudge, Marcus staggered to his feet. He looked like a man being led to the gallows. He tried to smile, but it was a pained, grotesque grimace. This is a tremendous honor for a young company, Julian continued, his voice layered with feigned sincerity. A chance to prove to the world that their meteoric rise is built on a bedrock of integrity. The audit will be conducted by Deloitte and the intellectual property review by Cromwell and Swain's top patent lawyers, the best in the business. It will be rigorous, it will be transparent, and it will be public. When it is complete, Innovatech will be a paragon of corporate virtue. Every word was another nail in Marcus's coffin. Deloitte, Cromwell and Swain, public. Julian wasn't just exposing him, he was scheduling an autopsy and selling tickets to it. The trap was perfect. If Marcus accepted, the audit would uncover the stolen Helios Code and the shady funding from Alistair Finch. He would be ruined, exposed as a fraud and a thief. His company would collapse, and he'd be buried in lawsuits. If he refused, if he stood up in front of this assembly and turned down this incredible honor, it would be an immediate public admission of guilt. Why would any legitimate company refuse a free, prestigious certification that would send their valuation into the stratosphere? The questions would start immediately. The investors would get spooked. The press would smell blood. He would be ruined all the same, just faster. He had no move. Julian had cleared the board. Marcus, Julian said, his voice softening, becoming almost fatherly. It was a cruel, brilliant touch. I know we had our differences in the past, but I have always believed in spotting and nurturing talent. I consider this a way of offering my support to your new venture. Let's show the world how business should be done. What do you say? He had framed it as a personal olive branch, making it even more impossible to refuse. The spotlight was still on Marcus. The silence was still deafening. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Amelia, seeing her entire fantasy life crumbling before her eyes, did the only thing she could. She stood up, grabbed Marcus's arm, and plastered a brilliant, desperate smile on her face. She began to applaud, her claps sharp and loud in the silent room. "Thank you, Julian," she called out, her voice trembling slightly but full of forced cheer. "We are overwhelmed. We accept this incredible honor. Thank you." She pulled a stunned Marcus back down into his seat as the room erupted in a final, thunderous wave of applause. They were applauding Julian's generosity. They were applauding Marcus's success. but mostly they were applauding the blood sport they had just witnessed. On stage, Julian smiled graciously. "Excellent. I look forward to reading the results. Let's all give another round of applause for the future of ethical innovation, Innovatic." As he walked off the stage and back to his table, he passed a society columnist. He knew a shark named Brenda Carlyle. She looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. "Julian," she whispered, "I've seen executions more humane than that." Julian simply smiled, took his seat next to Eris, and picked up his wineglass. Eris looked at him, her expression unreadable. She took his hand under the table. His was steady as a rock. He had not raised his voice. He had not leveled a single accusation. He had simply told the truth, wrapped it in a bow, and called it a gift. Across the room, under the glare of the house lights that had now come back up, Amelia and Marcus were trapped at their table. People were coming over to congratulate them, their words dripping with insincere praise while their eyes danced with morbid curiosity. Amelia was holding her smile in place with sheer force of will while Marcus stared blankly ahead, seeing not a ballroom full of admirers, but the abyss that had just opened up beneath him. The party she had planned was in full swing. She was the center of attention. She was in the spotlight, and it was burning her alive. The immediate aftermath was a masterclass in social disintegration. As soon as the formal presentations concluded, a subtle but seismic shift occurred in the room's atmosphere. The invisible walls of social standing went up around Amelia and Marcus. People who had been eager to talk to them an hour before now found urgent reasons to be elsewhere. A potential investor who had been fawning over Marcus suddenly remembered a pressing call he had to take. A society dame who had been praising Amelia's dress now looked right through her. They were no longer the hot new power couple. They were a car crash in progress, and no one wanted to be caught in the wreckage. Reporters, on the other hand, descended like vultures. Brenda Carlyle was the first to reach their table, her digital recorder already on. "Marcus, Amelia, congratulations," she said, her voice dripping with fake enthusiasm. "What an incredible vote of confidence from Julian Thorne. Were you surprised?" Marcus could only stammer, We're very grateful." "Of course. So you're not at all concerned about the public audit. Some might say that level of scrutiny on a new company is daunting. It implies you have absolutely nothing to hide." Her question was a beautifully crafted dagger. Amelia jumped in, her voice shrill. "Innovatech is an open book. Marcus is a genius, and we welcome the chance to prove it. This is just Julian's way of acknowledging the great work we're doing." But the desperation was plain to see. Her eyes were darting around the room, searching for an escape route. She saw Julian and Eris holding court at their table, surrounded by a circle of laughing, powerful people. They weren't even looking in her direction. They had moved on. The execution was over. They were now enjoying the party. That, more than anything, was the ultimate insult. They were already an afterthought. The escape was ignominious. They mumbled excuses about an early morning and practically fled the museum, a small coterie of journalists trailing them to the valet. The flash bulbs of the paparazzi felt less like a celebration and more like an interrogation. "Mr. Cole, are you worried your proprietary technology will be exposed by the audit?" "Miss Vance, is it true? Innovatic is funded by offshore accounts." "Is your company a house of cards, Mr. Cole?" They scrambled into their waiting car, the questions still being shouted at them as the doors closed. Inside the soundproofed interior of the Rolls-Royce, a lease, not a purchase, the silence was suffocating. Amelia finally rounded on Marcus, her carefully constructed facade shattering into a million pieces. "What did you do?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "An open book." "Are you insane? He knows, Julian knows everything." "How could he know?" Marcus babbled, sweat beading on his forehead. "The code was buried. The money was clean." "Nothing is clean to Julian Thorne," she shrieked, her hands flying to her hair, heedless of the expensive updo. "He has people. He can find out anything. You told me it was untraceable. You told me you were smarter than him. I am smarter than him, Marcus insisted weakly, but the words sounded hollow even to himself. He had believed it. He had believed his own hype fueled by Amelia's ambition and Alistair Finch's money. He had seen Julian as a slow, methodical dinosaur, and himself as the sleek, fast-moving mammal who would inherit the earth. He had forgotten that this particular dinosaur had built the park, set all the fences, and controlled the power. The drive back to their sterile, white-on-white Tribeca apartment was filled with bitter, panicked recriminations. The life they had built, a life funded by theft and hubris, was unraveling thread by thread. Meanwhile, back at the gala, Julian and Ares shared a quiet dance. The orchestra was playing a soft classic melody. Was that necessary? Ares asked, her head resting on his shoulder. Her question wasn't an accusation, but a genuine inquiry into his motives. Yes, Julian said simply, holding her close. When you find a cancer, you don't just watch it. You cut it out. Cleanly. Before it can spread. Marcus and Amelia, what they represent, it was a cancer. Greed, deceit, theft, disguised as ambition. It wasn't just about me, Ares. He stole from my company, from the thousands of people who work for me. He betrayed a trust. And she tried to use that betrayal as a weapon to hurt my family, my daughter, our peace. He looked down at her. There are lines you don't cross. They crossed them. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about quarantine. Ares nodded, understanding. It was the same logic she applied in her operating room. A diseased vessel had to be clamped and removed to save the heart. Later, as they were leaving, Julian received a text message. It was from Alistair Finch. It contained only 2 words: well played. The next morning, the news cycle was dominated by the story. Brenda Carlisle's column was brutal. Thorne delivers masterclass in public vivisection. The business journals were more measured, but no less devastating. They framed it as a bold, unprecedented move in corporate philanthropy. But the subtext was clear. Why Innovatech? What was Julian Thorne really up to? The phone calls to Innovatech started at 9:01 a.m. The first was from Alistair Finch's lawyers, officially pulling all funding and severing all ties, citing potential misrepresentation of proprietary assets. Without Finch's money, the company was insolvent. The second call was from Cromwell and Swain, formally notifying Marcus that the audit process, as accepted publicly by his associate Miss Vance, would begin the following Monday. They already had the court order to freeze all of Innovatech's digital assets. By noon, Marcus Cole's empire, which had seemed so bright and promising the day before, had ceased to exist. All that was left was the impending, very public autopsy. 3 weeks later, the world looked very different for everyone involved. The audit of Innovatech was a swift and brutal affair. As predicted, Cromwell and Swain's forensic tech team found Julian's digital fingerprint woven throughout the core of Marcus's predictive analytics engine. The theft was irrefutable. Simultaneously, Deloitte's accountants unraveled the web of shell corporations and discovered the funding from Alistair Finch, a fact that led to a separate SEC investigation into market manipulation. Titan Innovations filed a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against Marcus Cole for intellectual property theft. Alistair Finch, to distance himself, joined the suit, claiming he was a defrauded investor, effectively leaving Marcus to fight a war on 2 fronts with no allies and no resources. He was ruined professionally and personally. His name was toxic in the tech world. Amelia Vance's fate was in many ways more pathetic. Her name became a punchline in the society pages. She was the woman who threw her own public execution the ultimate Icarus, who flew too close to the sun on stolen wings. The invitations stopped coming. The friends who had flocked to her when she was with Marcus now ghosted her. Her alimony from Julian was set to run out in 3 years, and with Marcus's assets frozen, her lavish lifestyle evaporated overnight. She was forced to sell the jewelry sublet, the expensive apartment, and fade into the obscurity she had fought so desperately to escape. There was no grand downfall, just a quiet, humiliating slide into irrelevance. One crisp autumn Saturday, Julian was not in his office or a boardroom. He was on his hands and knees on the living room floor of his penthouse, helping Lily build a sprawling Lego city. Eris was curled on the couch reading a medical journal, a soft cashmere blanket draped over her legs. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The only sounds were the happy clicks of Lego bricks and the quiet turning of pages. Lily, her face a mask of concentration, held up a clear blue brick. "Dad, should the river go around the skyscraper or through the park?" "Good question, Chief Architect," Julian said, his tone serious. "A river through the park would be beautiful, but if we put it around the skyscraper, we can build a bridge and you have that new bridge set you wanted to use." "A bridge, yes," she said, her eyes lighting up. From the couch, Eris watched them, a soft smile on her face. This was the man she had married. Not the ruthless billionaire who could dismantle a rival without raising his voice, but the patient father who could spend an entire afternoon debating the urban planning of a plastic metropolis. She realized his actions at the gala weren't born from a place of coldness, but from a fierce protective warmth. He had built a fortress around this peaceful, happy Saturday afternoon. He had eliminated a threat to his family's tranquility with the same precision he used to design a circuit board, or as it turned out, help build a Lego bridge. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a news alert. Marcus Cole pleads guilty to wire fraud and IP theft as part of a settlement. Julian glanced at it, his expression unchanged. He swiped the notification away without a second thought. It was old news. It was a door he had already closed, locked, and soundproofed. He turned back to his daughter. "All right, Lilypad, let's build that bridge. We're going to make it the strongest bridge anyone has ever seen." He picked up a brick and clicked it into place. The quiet victory wasn't in the headlines or the courtrooms. It was here in the simple, unbreakable peace of his own home. He had built something that would last. 2 years passed. In the fast-paced world of technology and finance, 2 years can be an eternity. For Julian Thorne, it was a period of quiet growth and profound contentment. The Thorne Grant for Ethical Innovation, born from a moment of calculated warfare, had blossomed into one of the most respected accolades in the tech industry. Companies vied for the Thorne Gold Standard, and the annual gala was now a celebration of integrity, not a stage for personal drama. Titan innovations continued to break barriers, but Julian found himself delegating more, choosing instead to spend his evenings and weekends not in the boardroom, but in the peaceful sanctuary of his home. Lily was now 12, a bright, thoughtful preteen who had inherited her father's methodical mind and Iris's compassionate spirit. And Eris, the brilliant surgeon who had grounded his world, was now 6 months pregnant with their second child, a son. Their life was a tapestry woven with shared intellectual pursuits, easy laughter, and the gentle anticipation of a new beginning. The memory of Amelia and Marcus had faded, becoming a distant cautionary tale he no longer thought about. One Tuesday afternoon, Eris had a sudden craving for a specific type of cashmere baby blanket from a famously expensive children's boutique on Madison Avenue, a store named Le Petit Prince. Julian, eager to indulge her every whim, canceled his last meeting of the day and drove her there himself. The boutique was a hushed, elegant space filled with handcrafted wooden toys and racks of impossibly small, soft clothing. The air smelled of lavender and money. As Eris lovingly browsed the blankets, Julian wandered over to a display of silver rattles, smiling at the thought of a new baby's grip closing around one. "Can I help you find anything, sir?" The voice was familiar. A ghost from another lifetime. Julian turned slowly. Standing there, dressed in the store's simple but chic black uniform, was Amelia Vance. The 2 years had not been kind. Her vibrant blonde hair was now a more subdued, slightly brassy shade. The expensive, surgically enhanced tautness of her face had softened into a weary resignation. She was still beautiful, but the fire, the ambition that had once propelled her was gone. All that remained was the hollowed-out shell. Her eyes, which once flashed with defiance, were now carefully blank, the practiced, deferential gaze of a retail employee. She recognized him in the same instant he recognized her. For a split second, the professional mask slipped. He saw a flash of the old Amelia, a flicker of panic, humiliation, and bitter resentment. It was there and then gone, replaced by a forced, brittle smile. "Julian," she said, her voice a near whisper. What a surprise. "Amelia," he replied, his tone perfectly neutral. He felt no anger, no satisfaction, not even pity. He felt nothing. It was like finding an old, forgotten photograph of a house you used to live in. A flicker of recognition, but no emotional connection. Eris, hearing the exchange, walked over, her hand instinctively going to her swollen belly. She placed her other hand on Julian's arm, a simple, supportive gesture. Amelia's eyes dropped to Eris's stomach, and for the first time a genuine emotion broke through her facade, a deep, painful envy that twisted her features for a fraction of a second. She had chased wealth and status and had ended up with neither. Eris had chosen partnership and love and was now standing here radiant, carrying the heir to an empire Amelia had tried and failed to possess. "We were just looking for a blanket," Eris said, her voice gentle but firm, creating a protective space around her and Julian. "Of course," Amelia said, her professionalism clicking back into place like a shield. "The cashmere is over here. It's our finest." She led them to the display, her movements stiff and rehearsed. She began to explain the different weaves and origins of the wool, her voice sounding thin and reedy in the quiet opulence of the shop. She was a curator in a museum of a life she could no longer access, forced to sell the trappings of wealth to women like Eris. "We'll take this one," Julian said, pointing to a soft cream-colored blanket, cutting her sales pitch short. He wanted the interaction to be over, not for his own sake, but for hers. The encounter felt cruel, and he had no desire to prolong it. Amelia took the blanket and walked to the counter, her back ramrod straight. As she carefully folded it and wrapped it in tissue paper, the silence was deafening. She didn't ask about his life. He didn't ask about hers. There was nothing left to say. The war was long over, and the victor had forgotten there had even been a battle. Julian paid with his card. The name Julian Thorne seemed to mock her from the small screen of the credit card machine. "Thank you for your purchase," she said, the words automated, lifeless. "Take care, Amelia," Julian said, not unkindly, and guided Eris toward the door. He didn't look back. As the little bell above the door chimed their departure, he felt Eris squeeze his hand. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He looked down at his brilliant wife, then put a hand on her belly, feeling the gentle kick of his son. He looked out at the bustling Madison Avenue, at the life and the future that was waiting for them. The encounter in the boutique already felt like a dream, distant and insignificant. "I've never been better," he said, and he meant it. He had won not at the gala 2 years ago, but in every quiet, happy moment since. His victory wasn't her defeat. It was his own peace. And in the silent, gilded cage of the boutique, surrounded by treasures she could touch but never own, Amelia Vance was left with nothing but the echo of a life she had so carelessly thrown away. In the end, this wasn't just a story about revenge. It was a lesson in the nature of true power. Amelia and Marcus believed power was about what you could show off: the flashy car, the expensive dress, the public declaration of success. Julian Thorne knew that real power is quiet. It's the intelligence to see 10 moves ahead, the strength to protect what you love, and the wisdom to know that the most devastating blow is often delivered with a smile and a helping hand. They wanted a spectacle, and he gave them one, proving that the brightest spotlights often cast the darkest, most revealing shadows. Karma, it turns out, is a billionaire with a plan. If you loved watching this story of calculated justice unfold, and if you believe that true victory lies in intelligence over arrogance, then please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who appreciates a well-played endgame, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more stories where the cunning and the deserving always come out on top. Click the notification bell so you won't miss our next story of drama and delicious karma. Thank you for listening.